How's it going, everybody? I'm Evo of the Lineman Lounge, and I'm bringing you another episode of the series that I've been doing, covering every team and what their offseason outlook looks like. So, right now, 30 teams in the NFL are starting their de facto offseason. 32 realistically here pretty quick because we've got the big game this weekend. However, I figured it was a good opportunity for us to take a quick, concise look at each team in the NFL, where they're going to be at heading into the offseason, potential pending free agents, needs for the team, cap space, draft picks, things like that, and just kind of an overlook of how their season went and directions that I think that they kind of need to go in. And so with that, we're going to jump into our second to last team that I have, or second to last division I have to go over, which is the AFC North. And so I figure AFC North, it's probably good for me to bring in a little bit of help for this one, someone that knows a little bit more about the AFC North than I do, just off the cuff. So I might as well bring. You might have seen him before on the channel, but it's my boy Sleeveless Mike here.
¿Cómo están, bitches?
How's it going, Mike?
Good, brother. Hanging out. Pumped to be here with this little recap thing. You've been doing a great job with it, so glad I can kind of help you out with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, hopefully the people like what I'm putting out. The thought process is, and I've kind of gone over this with the intro every time, but I've been a victim of this in the past where I'm on internet forums just talking my butt off, being like, oh yeah, like this team needs this guy, so they should go out and sign him because he's going to be a free agent this year. So like, might as well go and get him. And it's just not that simple. You know, teams, they are competing against the cap. The cap is a myth, but not completely. If you're the Saints, you absolutely are in trouble this year. But like, it's not that easy. You have guys that just because they're a good receiver on one team doesn't mean they're going to be a good receiver on another team. Not good fits, things like that, and a lot of other kind of storylines behind the scenes that, you know, it really takes a little bit of extra knowledge, a little bit of extra work to understand how these teams are going to be able to attack the offseason. And I've taken a decent amount of time, and it's been a labor of love, really, because I like getting into the nitty gritty of this stuff. So I figured, hey, if I'm going to be doing this research on my own just to be able to talk about it on the show, might as well put it out to everybody so that hopefully you can take that knowledge and apply it to your thought process with how teams should attack the offseason. So with that, let's get into this AFC North. So starting off with the Steelers first. Absolutely, I understand that. I got the NFC North coming up, man. That's going to be a tough one for me to fucking stay objective. But they finished the season 10-7, made the playoffs, surprisingly, because I don't know. I won't speak for you, but when we started the year, I didn't expect them to be a playoff team.
I mean, it's always hard to root against Tomlin. Like we talked about, I want to say the very beginning of the year, we're making our predictions. I was like, they'll probably go fucking 9-8 because Tomlin doesn't ever have a losing season. They found a way to do it again with guys like Mason Rudolph. The guy just wins. That's one of those leaders of men. So, but did I expect them to be a playoff team? Absolutely fucking not.
Yeah, well, they finished 10-7, and offensively, according to PFF, they were the 25th ranked offense, and that kind of makes sense to me. I mean, Kenny Pickett just does not seem like the guy. But you also ran a majority year with Matt Canada as your offensive coordinator, who I think, you know, subjectively and objectively is terrible at play calling. Coaching, I don't know that he's any good, but you're not really seeing that as much. The play calling was absolutely just terrible. But it looks like Tomlin is back, at least. I know there was a lot of talks about Tomlin potentially not being there, and I think he's kind of wearing out his welcome with some of the Pittsburgh fans. I know a friend of both of ours, Wes Aston, he's not a big fan of Tomlin anymore. And I think you're looking at the longest tenured head coach in the league now, I believe.
Yeah,
now that Carroll and Belichick are out. And, you know, head coaches in this day and age in football just don't stick around for much longer than a decade. And a decade is a good run for a head coach. So things, you know, it feels like it's about that time for a parting of ways and a new regime to come in. But not this year. You know, there were talks about that. Not this year. They're going to run it back. And for me, the Steelers, props to them getting into the playoffs, but it's going to be tough going forward, especially in this AFC North. I mean, you have three very competitive teams to go against, and you're getting 8 games out of the year, or six games out of the year are going to be against these opponents, and they could easily be 6 losses. So as of right now, the adjusted effective cap space expected for the Steelers is for them to be 19.3 million below, or like over the cap, excuse me. So they are having to get cap compliant here pretty quick. And it's not like they're losing a lot in free agency as of right now. Safety Miles Killebrew, linebacker Marcus Golden, linebacker Quan Alexander, and backup / starting quarterback Mason Rudolph, old dent head. Those are the big names that are expected to be free agents, basically because their contract is expiring. But there are other guys on this team that could end up being potential cap cuts. Some veteran guys, Hayward and whatnot, because they are so far, in the red on the cap. So defensively, this team was still pretty damn good. PFF had them ranked 7th on defense. And I think when you have a JJ Watt on your team, that's just going to boost the entire squad quite a bit. And with Tomlin being a defensive coach, you're always going to kind of lean that way. But to me, the biggest thing here is Kenny Pickett's not your guy. Moving on from Matt Canada is going to be a good thing for them, but they don't really seem to have an offensive identity to me.
Well, new offensive coordinator out there was just hired, right? With Greg Roman.
Oh, Greg Roman is going to the Chargers.
Chargers. Okay. So never mind. I was like, well, they're going to be a run first team, which is, I feel like the way the Steelers would need to kind of build this team right now. They are so far off at the quarterback spot. They make a play for a Russell Wilson. There are some guys that are going to get cut, some vets they're going to be available. I mean, they might kick the tires on Joe Flacco after they saw what he could do. So there's a lot of opportunities for them to get better at that spot, but they don't really have any money to spend. They're going to have to restructure some big-time contracts. Like a Minkah Fitzpatrick might have to talk about a restructure. Some of those higher-level contracts they're going to be tough for them to maintain.
And you are right, though, about this kind of needing to be a run-first style team. The offensive coordinator that they did bring in was Arthur Smith.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, so the question, the thing that you will know is that their offensive line will definitely get right. He's going to get those guys right, which they do need to work on their offensive line. This offseason team they do have a big need at cornerback, but offensive tackle and interior offensive line are like the next two with a bullet on that team. They could use a third wide receiver, but to me, the fifth thing I've got in here in the most important spot is quarterback. And where they're picking at pick number 20 in the first round this year, you're not going to be able to get aggressive about getting one of those quarterbacks. I mean, if you truly believe that there is a top 3 set of quarterbacks in this draft that are surefire, like start day 1 type of guys, you're not moving from pick 20 up to, we'll say, the top 5 in the draft without leveraging your future to a huge extent. And you're probably having to add players in there.
3 ones to get up from 20 at least.
You're more than that in this draft, I would believe. I'm talking 3 1s and 3 2s probably. And maybe some change, because that's such a huge jump. I don't see that happening. I know that, and I'm operating in the spectrum of what my Vikings would have to do to get up into the top 3, and 2 first-round picks is 100% there. 3 first-round picks is on the table as well for them to move up into that range. So talking another 9 picks back, it's going to be even worse than that. Like, you'd have to be talking about throwing in a player to take off some of that draft capital. And the only one that I can really think of off the top of my head that would make a dent would be a JJ Watt, and they ain't moving him. That's the identity of that defense. So realistically for me, the Steelers, if there's going to be a year where Tomlin takes a losing season, this could be it. And it kind of makes sense. The losing year this year and the end of Tomlin era with the Steelers.
I mean, it makes sense that, because they don't have a ton of ways that they can get better. At the 20 spot, I don't think that they have the juice to go up and get somebody. They're like gold late in the first or in the second round trying to find a quarterback. Then you're punting on Kenny Pickett at that point, and Kenny hasn't proven anything in the league to warrant any draft capital coming back. So you can't really move off of Kenny. Kenny's probably going to be their guy, so that you have to get better around him. I would expect them to look for offensive linemen in the draft, and probably primarily offensive. They're getting old. They have not been good for a couple of years, and this is going to be a run-first team with Arthur Smith. So,
yeah, and that's one thing that kind of gets parroted around about Arthur Smith, and what really kind of got him the job in Atlanta in the first place was he was able to take Ryan Tannehill and kind of revitalize his career, which Tannehill has the ability to run around a little bit, former wide receiver from Texas A&M and everything. And that sort of play style can kind of fit in with Kenny Pickett, but it's still going to revolve around being a run-first offense. And you've got two running backs there, Najee Harris, who I'm kind of out on. Yes, he had a better second half of the year, and Jaylen Warren, who, I kind of like as a rotational guy as well. Like, you've got two backs there. If they were, Derrick Henry, I suppose, if they're somehow able to make the cap work.
I don't think they're going to have enough money to go out and really get anybody.
Yeah.
They're going to look probably just build straight in the draft and maybe re-sign one or two of their own guys, but I don't know who they really want to go out and get. Who they really need to maintain. Blake Martinez and get him cheap, probably play a little bit of linebacker for you,
maybe. But that's the thing, as far as their priority pending free agents, I don't have any one of those guys that I'm like, I need to go out and re-sign him because he's a role, or anything more than a small role player on my team as of right now. So with that, it will probably, honestly, I think Cam Hayward could be gone for this team. I think that it makes a lot of sense to get rid of him. And then a couple of restructures is definitely going to get you back in the positive, but not enough to make a splash impact free agent signing. Of course, you can manipulate a contract if you want to reunite someone like a Derrick Henry with Arthur Smith, where it's backloaded on the deal. But I don't know if that's really going to happen. Now, for those big needs, cornerback and offensive line, at pick 20, you're not hurting in that spot at all for some of the better talent in this draft. Cornerback and defensive players in general, according to a lot of the mocks and rankings and stuff right now, defenders aren't going until maybe pick 9, and they really start to pick up around pick 11 in the draft. And you have 3, maybe 4 cornerbacks that are absolutely worthy of that first round grade that, 1 to 2 of them should be available at pick 20 if you want to go that route. But otherwise, offensive tackle, Cooper DeJean
right there would be
black and gold. It makes sense for that to work. Though Cooper DeJean and I just actually recently found this out. He broke his leg in November. Not terrible, but he did break his leg in November. We haven't really seen much from him since, and we don't know how he's going to run. So the combine and medicals and stuff are going to tell you a lot there. But I really do like Cooper DeJean, either as a cornerback or a safety. He does remind me a lot of a Harrison Smith, and not just because he's white.
A little bit because he's white, but
maybe a little bit, Yeah. But I don't see color. But either way, at offensive tackle, interior offensive line in the first round typically isn't a way that you go. The one guy that I would look at there is Jackson Powers Johnson. He is skyrocketing up boards. People are not only is he, generational kind of center prospect, but also a high level guard prospect, potentially the first or second guard prospect in this class next to Cameron Haynes. Or not Cam Haynes. That's an Archer. But his last name is Haynes and starts with a C. I can't remember the first. Christian Haynes, I think. Either way, I believe out of UConn. Either way, he's one of the top interior guys in this draft, and he's very commonly getting mocked in the first round now. And he's a guy that I could see them going for if they want to reset that interior offensive line. But otherwise, offensive tackle. The deepest spots in this draft are wide receiver and offensive tackle. We're talking about 12 to 15 guys that are going to be taken within the first 2 rounds that are all starter day 1 type of offensive tackles. So they could absolutely look there as well. And so that means there's going to be plenty of them available at pick 20. So as far as the Steelers, that's probably where they're going to kind of start looking in the draft. But if they really want to be aggressive, they can try and move up for a quarterback or something like that. I just don't see them having the balls to do that right now. All right. Any last comments from you on the Steelers, or any other thoughts?
Fuck the Steelers.
All right. That's kind of where I figured it was going. With that, we're going to move on to the Cincinnati Bengals. So the Bengals finished the year 9-8 without Joe Burrow as the starter because he went down with injury yet again. And that's kind of kind of the thing with Burrow as of right now is he's always getting injured. He's injured at the beginning of the year, and now he's getting injured at the end of the year as well. And a lot of that has to wrap around the offensive line. I mean, the O-line is been a big problem for the Bengals since Burrow has been there.
The entire tenure.
And I'm not willing to give the injury prone label to Burrow at this point because I think the offensive line is doing him no services there.
I'm not sure anybody's been hit in the NFL more than Joe Burrow has since Burrow's entered the league. I think he's at the highest.
Yeah, it's been a rough go for him, but the talent's kind of undeniable otherwise when he's on the field. Then again, you have Jake Browning go out there in relief and look pretty good, at least for a couple of weeks, for a truly backup style quarterback. And that's going to play out really well for Browning this offseason, I think, because he is one of their free agents. As far as the rest of the Bengals team, offensively, PFF had them ranked as the 15th offense, which says a lot considering that they were without their starting quarterback for most of the year, or a good chunk of the year at least. And because their offensive line is pretty crappy, that just kind of goes to show that system is not too shabby. Defensively, though, Lou Anarumo has got some answering to do. They're 27th ranked in the league, and you kind of saw that as the year progressed along. The defense was not as good as it was in years past, and they're definitely going to need some help there. The good news for this Bengals team. Go ahead, Mike. I know you guys.
I remember getting dragged at the beginning of the year when I said that the Browns defense was fucking light years ahead of where the Bengals defense was. Bengals fans are like, "Oh my God, you have no idea what you're talking about. You don't know ball." What were they ranked again?
27th.
Okay,
and we'll get to your Brownies here in a minute. See where they were ranked. This
not
as
good as they were.
Yeah, that's true. But good news for the Bengals fans. They do have a lot of cap space to play around with. All right. So they got $53.1 million in cap space adjusted for effective cap. So they're going to be able to make a lot of moves. Now, they do have some big name free agents that they probably should look at re-signing. Defensive tackle DJ Reader. This team, like DJ Reader is a good role player. I don't think like he's an earth mover or anything like that, but there is a noticeable difference when he's on the field and when he's not. Now he's getting up there in age a little bit. But he's a guy that I still would look at trying to re-sign and hopefully get some sort of a team-friendly deal with it. Wide receiver Tyler Boyd, he's getting up there in years. It feels like he's been with the Bengals for like a decade. He had some drop issues this year. I feel like he's probably going to be one of those guys that they let walk. But
basically, everybody on that Bengals team had issues with drops this year.
That is true. Yep. Cornerback Chidobe Awuzie, right tackle Jonah Williams, who former first-round pick. They've tried him left side, right side. He's never really lived up to that first-round hype, though he's become an average starter at times. The big name here, wide receiver T. Higgins. So I fully expect them to do whatever they can to keep him in-house there, to include using the franchise tag on this guy. I'm not sure how he'll feel about that. And honestly, I'm not sure how I feel about that, because having T. Higgins on my fantasy team this year and then watching actual games of him playing, he was having a lot of drops. Games where you weren't having Jamar Chase out there. He's the number one guy. He's having drops, and that's like where you're supposed to thrive. He's a high-end number 2, borderline low-end number 1 style receiver in years past, and then this year just did not look that great in comparison. So I still think that in order to keep this team effective in the pass game, they are going to look to try to retain him however possible, and they've got the cap space to do it through either a normal contract or through the franchise tag.
But they're looking at having to give that a contract of almost $20 million probably to keep T. Higgins. And when you told me that we were going to do this and you wanted me to come on for this one, I went and did a little extra research. But like the production you're getting for T. Higgins doesn't match the dollar amount, in my opinion. Not that he's a bad receiver, but this year was tough. Like he had 76 targets, 7 drops. That is 10% of his fucking targets, or just about 10% of his targets are getting dropped. Like, I'm not paying a guy $18 million a year to drop 9.75% of his passes, whatever the fuck it comes out to.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is, and why I feel like they might lean a little bit more towards the franchise tag is, hey, we've seen what he has been in the past. Maybe this was just a weird down year. Because if you're getting the production that you've gotten from him previously, I'm all for the 20 mil. But what we saw this year is just not up to par. So maybe it's franchise tag. We're not committed to this guy long term now, and we'll see if he's able to produce or not. and then look at possibly resigning him the year after to more of a long-term deal. But like if they want, they absolutely can move on from him. Again, wide receiver in this draft is a wide receiver heavy draft.
Mm-hmm.
You can go out and get a guy that very well could produce just like T. Higgins, or better at this point in Higgins' career if this lack of production continues forward. And a name to watch for that, Brian Thomas Jr. out of LSU. Like he reminds me of T. Higgins and a little bit of Randy Moss in him, to be honest.
There's some big bodies, bodies in this receiver class.
I feel like Brian Thomas is being overshadowed so much by Malik Neighbors that people aren't seeing what he's actually doing on the field. Could be a surprise, like really good pick there. Other players that are expected to leave, tight end Irv Smith, former Viking. I don't expect them to try to re-sign him. That was just a project that didn't work out. Guard Max Sharping, tight end Drew Sample, and backup / maybe potential bridge guy Jake Browning at quarterback. So Browning did probably play himself into a much better contract this year. So props to the former Washington Husky there.
I would imagine he played himself into a chance to compete in camp somewhere because he knows that's not happening in Cincinnati. If he doesn't get that opportunity, he will be back. He'll re-sign on a couple-year deal as a backup.
Yeah,
but I would imagine that Jake's probably going to get 15 mil somewhere to go and compete.
That might be a little bit high. And now we don't know really what the market's going to look like. But I feel like the delta between backup quarterbacks and starting quarterbacks has widened quite a bit, not just because starting quarterback pay is reaching into the 30 and 40 millions for average quarterbacks, but because that price is so much higher, teams are taking more discounted deals on backup quarterbacks. For instance, like PFF has the expected value for a Jacoby Brissett to be $6 million per year on average. Gardner Minshew $8 million per year on average, and Gardner started most of the year for the Colts and looked pretty decent. So you probably can get Browning for $4 million, $5 million, maybe if he's really got a good agent. But we'll see from there. Either way, I think the big news here with the Bengals, other than that, is Callahan leaving. You have their offensive coordinator Callahan leaving. He's the head coach of the Titans now. And this sucks for you, and we'll get into this with the Browns, but he takes his dad along with him.
It sucks.
It says a lot for this offense that they were able to stay productive and still stay middle of the pack with the 15th ranked offense, despite losing one of the top quarterbacks in the league and having a down year in production from T. Higgins. You lose an offensive coordinator, it can make or break that offense. We saw it really this year with the Eagles. Shane Steichen leaves, and that Eagles offense just never looked like it got on track. And it obviously was abysmal come playoff time. So I think that there is a potential that this Bengals offense could look really different. We'll see if Zach Taylor really had his hands on it or not. But what's your thoughts on Callahan leaving? I mean, I believe that this is probably the most impactful part of the offseason for this team.
Yeah, so this is great for me. He's a good OC. There's a reason he got the job. It sucks that he took his dad with him, but they're going to have to fill that spot. They have a lot of guys to re-sign. Now, granted, they got a ton of money. We'll see which directions they go. But this is year 2 in a row that they're having to replace a coordinator. Did they lose their DC the year prior?
Lou Anaromo's been at least the defensive coordinator the past 2 years. I don't know who was.
Maybe it was a couple of years ago when they went to the Super Bowl. Was he the DC when they went to the Super Bowl?
I think so.
Okay.
I'm not positive.
Maybe I'm off. But I don't know, man. I'm not excited to see what the Bengals do because I'm tired of their fans. They have been so goddamn annoying this season. All of a sudden, they think they're good because Joe Burrow's there. But listen, I'm a Browns fan. We've never been good except for the entire beginning of the NFL.
Right. Well, with that, we can kind of jump over to your Brownies. So Browns end the year with an 11-6 record. Look really damn good, despite having copious, continuous amounts of issues at the quarterback position, losing your star running back early on in the year. But yeah, 11-6. PFF ranks them offensively as the 28th ranked offense, and that's probably a little bit more because this team was a running game style team, and then you lose one of the best runners in football, and you take away a big hunk of like what their game plan is, and they're doing constant adjustments throughout the year. And so to get 28th, like they didn't seem like the 28th ranked offense at the end of the year. They seemed a lot more middle of the pack because Flacco really brought that group together. And then defensively, the 6th ranked defense at points in time in this year, the number 1 ranked defense for sure.
Yeah. The defense did not hold up at the end of the season. They were very good basically all throughout, though. The offense sputtered, but when you have as many injuries, like we lost both of our starting tackles, Nick Chubb, our starting quarterback, our backup quarterback, wide receivers, the team was decimated. So being 28th on offense is not surprising, but they were able to find ways to win that can speak to how good that defensive, game plan was week in, week out, to be able to, keep that offense in games.
All right. So because you're going to have a much more intimate knowledge of this, I'm going to kind of let you go with this here after I run down what we're looking at for the rest of this offseason here with the Browns. But as of right now, PFF has that projected for an adjusted effective cap of negative 20.6 million. Now, we've talked about this before. You think that there's some ways that they can absolutely get into the positive with this, even possibly to the point of being able to add some free agents. But right now, pending free agents or expiring contracts, you have Zadarius Smith on the edge, defensive tackle Shelby Harris, quarterback Joe Flacco, linebacker Sione Takitaki, free safety Rodney McLeod, defensive tackle Maurice Hurst, linebacker Anthony Walker Jr., defensive tackle Jordan Elliott, and center Nick Harris. Where do you think that the Browns are going to be able to make some of this money back, and which of those guys are going to be priority re-signings for you?
So money back is definitely coming from restructures. Deshaun is 100% getting restructured again. There's no way around that because we are so far over. We're going to kick that can down the road until 2027, I believe, when the chickens will come home to roost and we can't afford a pot to piss in. But that it's going to come from there. There'll also be some other restructures as well. I believe we also have some cap that we can still roll over from this year. We ended up restructuring throughout the season as well, generating more cap, especially getting ready to get into the season. So I think we went in with $20-something million in cap space at the beginning of the year. We're going to be 29 over. Restructures out of our ass. They've been working the cap here in Cleveland for almost as long as the Saints have. But we're just a couple years behind having to actually pay the piper for when that happens. So we'll be able to add some pieces, but this next couple years, like the first 5 years of the Deshaun window, if it extends past that or not, we have to win one because we're not going to be able to afford all these guys once that contract comes due at the end. In terms of priority signings, we got to retain some defensive tackles. We had a really good rotation. I would love to see Shelby Harris back. Maurice Hurst is another guy I would like to get back. And I don't think they're going to cost that much money. They were late signings in free agency anyways. Our big need, though, we're going to be looking for a wide receiver. We got to find another guy to complement Amari Cooper. We thought we were going to do that with Moore, but it just didn't. It didn't work out that way. At least it hasn't shown to work out that way. Cedric Tillman has some ability. He could be a jump ball guy, but is he truly another threat? I'm not sure. Njoku was fantastic this year, though. So if we can get an Amari Cooper, a David Njoku, and then one other guy who can be a consistent contributor like we see down in Cincinnati with a Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase, like we can be very, very good. You don't have to have 3 wide receivers. If you get a 1, a 2, and you have a solid tight end, which is exactly what David Njoku proved to be this year, they can be great. But we got to get one more guy. Offensive line will always be addressed on this team because we obviously need massive amounts of depth, and we'll be dealing with new offensive line coach and assistants. So we are going to be looking at potentially replacing a left tackle. Jed Bulls is going on to his 5th-year option this year, and we'll see if he makes it through it. But it's going to be weapon opposite of Amari Cooper, interior defensive line and some offensive line. So it's going to be kind of a boring draft, but I'll take that.
Yeah, and that it kind of sucks for the draft. Like you said, don't have the first round pick, part of the Deshaun Watson trade, but you guys do have, I believe, slated for 8 picks as of right now, starting off in the second round. Biggest team need that I do have for you guys is wide receiver, and then it switches over to tackle, defensive line, offensive line, and then potentially running back. So what are your thoughts on the running back situation? Nick Chubb, what have you heard? Is he going to be ready for the season? I mean, it's pretty tough to say that.
The last report that I got was that he was okay. He's walking around, but they don't know. I don't think a for sure timetable on when he's going to resume football activities. Should be cleared to resume football activities. I'm hoping that is going to be sometime during training camp. He will hopefully doesn't take a snap during preseason, any of that. And I'd love to see him back, but we're going to have to address this spot. Jerome Ford has moments, but he is too streaky. Kareem Hunt will not be back on the team. The way things have ended here in back-to-back years with the organization and Kareem Hunt, I cannot see a way that they're going to be able to make that work out. So I would imagine they'll be looking to draft running back late in the draft. You can find quality backs at any point in the draft or even as undrafted free agents. So we're going to have to address that. I don't know if we'll spend money at the running back spot because Nick Chubb is still under contract. I'm just hoping that Nick Chubb does not become a salary cap casualty due to the injury and all the things that happened, which is a pretty big possibility, I think.
Yeah, well, so I failed to remember, but I know that we went through this situation in Minnesota with Teddy Bridgewater, where his deal had a toll on it, basically because of the injury. If he's for some reason not able to play this year, or the Browns say that, like, hey, this knee isn't good to go out, that you can basically IR him in a sort of ways, and then a lot of the contracted toll where the money doesn't count against the cap, the year on the contract doesn't count against them. It kind of sucks for the player. But
Right.
It pushes everything to the right 1 year and allows them to rehab and still be a part of the team, get all into those medical facilities and stuff like that. So maybe that's a potential, and that could help you a little bit with some cap flexibility, possibly. But as far as like other draft stuff, the 2 big spots that I really think you need help, wide receiver and offensive tackle. Even though you're selected in the second round, like, again, this draft is loaded with
deep at those 2 spots,
loaded with tackles, and I think that you guys will be able to nab one of those 2 spots for sure with that second round pick that could definitely make an impact day one. And then last little bit of thoughts here with the Brown offensive line coach leaving. What are your thoughts there? How big of an impact is that going to be on that offensive line? Who, the line has been really good, but then obviously you have all these injuries and everything this year, and who's taking over for him? Do you have faith in that group now?
So losing Coach Callahan is tough because he's the best offensive line coach in the NFL, who's been regarded as that for quite some time. And he was able to take guys that maybe weren't great and make them serviceable. We saw that with Jedrick Wills. He looked very serviceable at times, but just was not consistent. It sucks. But how fucking cool is it for him to be able to go and coach for his son, head coach? That's great. So I'm happy for him. I'm very appreciative for all the work that he did, because we had one of the best offensive lines in football for a really long time. All thanks to that man. Am I confident that they will be able to do what Coach Callahan did? No, because I don't. If they grew on trees, like he wouldn't be such a sought after commodity. Do I think they'll be okay? Yeah. We'll see how we address those positions in the offseason and the draft. I think we will find a way to make it work, though.
All righty. Well, with that, we can move on to our last team here in the AFC North, the Baltimore Ravens. Now, obviously, the Ravens had a very deep run into the playoffs this year. A lot of us, myself included, thought that they were going to be making to the Super Bowl, but they got the Chiefs bug. They got bit by Mahomes and T. Swift. They finished the year 13-4. They had the 5th ranked offense and the 3rd ranked defense, according to PFF, by the end of the year. So a really, really strong year from this team. You have basically the MVP at quarterback in Lamar Jackson. They look smart for giving him that contract now, and not letting anyone else go after him and get him. But I think that while this team still should be good, offensively, I felt like they were limited quite a bit in their passing game because of receiving options. Now, obviously, like Zay Flowers had himself a really damn good year. But the big thing for this team is like, hey, how can we get a better passing game in this offense? You look at what they're going to be going into next year with, and it's a tough situation. They have $5.2 million in cap space and a lot of big name guys that need to be re-signed or are going to be pending free agents. And I think it basically means that a lot of them are going to be walking. As of right now, wide receiver Odell Beckham Jr., guard Kevin Zeitler, who's 34. So, I mean, he's getting up there in age, so it's okay to kind of see him go. But you got running back Gus Edwards, cornerback Rock Ya-Sin, wide receiver Nelson Aguilar, backup Pro Bowl quarterback Tyler Huntley, inside linebacker Patrick Queen, Jadeveon Clowney at the edge, cornerback Ronald Darby, defensive tackle Justin Madubuike, who is probably one of the best tackles in the market. Yeah, he's going to get paid. Running back J.K. Dobbins, wide receiver Devin Duvernay, and quarterback Trayvon Mullen. And I had to abbreviate this list. There's a bunch more like role players on this team that are going to be hitting free agency as well. With $5.2 million against the cap, I mean, they're going to have to try to push some of Lamar's money around. I would have to.
They're going to. They're going to do the same thing that we're doing. They're going to kick it down the road. Mm-hmm. That's why we're going to see these quarterback contracts stay inflated, because with these void years and being able to restructure, they can overspend. But they're still screwed. This team is not going to be able to sign hardly any of their own guys, and the one that's going to hurt them the most, in my opinion, is Madubuike.
Yeah,
he was so fucking good in the middle of that defense,
and it is like the perfect candidate for a guy that is going to go out and get a big contract. Not only is he like a top 10 interior defensive lineman in this league, he's 26 years old, coming off that rookie contract. It is like perfect for a team that wants to go and get a guy in their prime. And so he's looking at, 20 to 25 million per year annual average value for an interior defensive lineman. That's something that I think the Ravens are going to have a very tough time competing with. Their best bet to keep him probably is a franchise tag. But when you're Justin Madubuike, I'm sitting out. Like, I know that I'm worth way more than that. And in the long term, when you're playing in the trenches like that, you got to go get your bag. So, like, he's probably going to force the situation to an extent. And if
they give him the franchise tag, and I don't think he plays on it, he will get a new deal after they move additional monies around to give him a deal that is requisite with his performance.
Right. They do have 6 picks in this draft, and the spots that they do need help on, if they're able to re-sign a bunch of these guys, focuses around, again, that passing game. So wide receiver, and then cornerback, they could still use some help out at cornerback despite the defense being really good. And again, good draft for wide receivers. Cornerbacks, there's a steep drop off when you get into the second round. A couple of these guys that are first round talents will leak in the second round, but then there's a pretty steep drop off after that. So if they really want a cornerback, first round is probably the way to go for it there at the end of the first, and then hopefully get a role player of a wide receiver towards the end of the second round. But it's going to be tough. I still think that this is going to be a strong team going forward. The addition of Todd Monken there definitely made Lamar a better passer. The fact that they went away from the run game, though, in the playoffs is really, I think, the killer for them. I heard a fun anecdote today that people were thinking that it was more Lamar than Todd Monken in that game, saying, I want to pass more and stuff like that to try to be competitive against Mahomes. Just like a 1-for-1 thing. But you have to remember who the play caller is. So, yeah, to me, like, I expect the Ravens to be very competitive again next year. It'll be interesting to see how they maneuver this cap space around.
Yeah, fuck them.
Another one of those. Another one. All right, man. Well, with that, that is our offseason overview outlook for the AFC North. Good to have you on, and Mike and I will be back this weekend to go over the big game here.
Hell yeah.
All right. Any parting words for the people?
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Even you're doing a kick-ass job. Appreciate you, brother.
All righty. Well, if you guys like what we're doing here, giving you a wrap-up of this outlook for each division, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment down below what your thoughts are on each team in this division, or go back on any of the other videos that I've done on the other divisions. We still have a little bit more to go, but let me know what you would do with your team, what you think other teams should do to try to work their way towards a championship. But with that, we'll catch you later.